They're preparing. All right, so we are live. And with my good friend Don McCutchen for the first time storytelling hour. And Don is joining us from Germany, same as Jocelyn. As you could say, all my good friends are still in Germany, and I'm in my lonesome in Las Vegas. So I met Don back in 2013, the first time I was mobilized at More URF. And Don was the spectrum manager, Chief Officer McCutchen in the G6, and I was going there to go be the deputy G6. Now, things got very weird because of the chief of staff at the time. So Don ended up carrying half the hat of being deputy, and I was the 2IC. And anyways, it was very confusing. But Don and I really got to know each other and worked with together. So, and then when I went back to Germany, Don at the time was in Virginia with his new bride, Patricia, and Patricia owned a house in Germany. So I moved in the apartment in the house that Patricia owned. And then later on, Don and Patricia moved in downstairs. So now we were friends and neighbors. And it was really great to, there's a really cool experience to have friends living downstairs. And Don and Patricia are really good cooks. So they were kind enough. And I love when I got text messages like, hey, you want to come down for dinner or you want to come down for breakfast? And I'm like, yeah. What time? So they treated me very well. So welcome to the live broadcast, Don.
Yeah, thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah. So tell us, I kind of gave a little bit about you, but tell us a little bit more about you before we get to your first time story.
Well, since you left Germany the first time, I have since retired from the Marine Corps. And I'm now a full-time dad. I have a 1.5-year-old, very precocious little girl named Sylvie, and she fills my day.
Yeah. And I love Sylvie. So she's such a darling and a gem. Patricia took her upstairs because she was all about, getting engaged in the live stream and to keep things quiet. She went upstairs. But so my goal, and Don and Patricia were helping me with this, and we did not achieve it, but we were trying to get Sylvie's first word to be Anne. So we didn't succeed because that would have been such a cool first. I have never been somebody's first word. So what ended up being her first words?
Her first word was puppy.
Puppy.
Which is her favorite word, puppy. She wakes up in the morning, the first thing out of her mouth is puppy. She's got to go check on the dog. So, yeah.
Bella is the dog in question. She's also a darling and a sweetheart. And Bella and little man, they did all right together. We weren't the best of buddies.
Yeah. Well, Bella doesn't really like anybody. She just kind of wants to do her own thing. So
now, Little Man was beneficial to Bella because Little Man would go try and eat Bella's food, and then that would motivate Bella to go ahead and eat her food.
Consequently, Sylvie has kind of taken up that role a little bit.
Yes.
She'll walk over towards Bella's food, and Bella will assume that Sylvie's going to try and eat it, so Bella will go eat her food.
Huh. Very well done. Good job, Sylvie. All right. So tell us, what is the first time story you're going to share with us today?
The first time I went bungee jumping.
Yeah, excellent. Something I have yet to do. So where did you go, and what inspired you to try it? And then where did you go and how was it?
Well, this was back in 1992. And so bungee jumping had just become a thing. Like it started in Australia, and it made its way to the US, and people of kind of my age group were all talking about it. I grew up in a little tiny town, and nobody, even knew where you would go to go bungee jumping. And I worked at a miniature golf course and they had a kind of a mini amusement park there and so on. And during that summer, a company that did bungee jumping from a crane set up, and the manager of the golf course wanted employees to go out there to try it. You know, who wants to go do it? And I was like, yeah. You know, I was young and stupid and indestructible, so it sounded like it would be a great time. So I volunteered, and then I paid a little bit extra money to get it videotaped and so on. So that was kind of how I ended up bungee jumping. Was my boss asked for people to go bungee jumping. So
Yeah, so that way others would see it and you're like, oh, I want to do that too. And it's safe. Obviously, if this person's not plunging to their death,
right,
I can try it too.
I went down
So,
off the ground.
so as you got up there, so I think some people, well, there's one thing if you're going to do it off a bridge and that way you're not raising up to where you're going to jump from. I think that's probably impacts your fear factor in a different way than
Yeah,
you're actually going up and you're thinking, oh crap. So did you have that feeling or were you young enough that you're like, I'm good?
absolutely. Like you start on the ground, they do all the prep work on the ground, they put you in this like 8-point harness with, you know, these huge carabiners, and then you get onto this platform, which is roughly the size of a desk. Start on the ground, and then they raise you up 180 feet. And my thought, like in my head, before I even got on the platform, I'm like, don't look down, because if you look, because I'm afraid of heights. You know, not deathly afraid of heights, but I am afraid of heights. So, you know, I knew if I looked down, I would chicken out. Like, so I just don't look down, just look out at the horizon, just look out at the horizon. And where I grew up is utterly flat. So 180 feet is a good vantage point to see most of my town. And, you know, I could see out to the mountains, and I could literally see my house, which was 3 miles away. And so that was kind of on the ride up. That was what I'm thinking. I'm like, oh, this is a kind of a cool view. This is pretty neat up here. You know, I dig this, right? And then they give you a countdown from 3. And again, I told you in my mind, I'm like, I'm going on the first countdown.
So there's nobody else up there with you, or is there
No,
like
there is.
there's so many ways. Okay, yeah.
Somebody in the basket with you. And they're talking to you the whole time, you know. I think part of that is them trying to ease your fear, get your mind off of something other than the fact that you're very high up, about to throw yourself off of a perfectly good crane. So, you know, we get to the top, and he says, you know, and then he gives you kind of the brief of, I'm going to count down from 3, and then you're going to tip, just don't bend your knees, just lean forward, and then you're going to fall. So 3, 2, 1. And when he said 1, I started to lean forward, and I got to about 45 degrees. And then I looked down, and cars are like this big. And I suddenly went, in my mind, I don't want to do this anymore. But gravity took over, and that option was taken away from me. And this was, now bear in mind, this was 25 years ago, but this is still a very vivid memory of the ground rushing up at me, because you're literally in free fall, you're just falling. And then the bungee cord just catches you, and you feel, it's a really odd experience. It's like nothing else I've ever experienced, even jumping from an airplane, because when you jump out of an airplane, it's a shock. Your chute opens and it's a shock. The bungee gradually like slows you down, and then it's almost like slowing down in a car where you kind of feel inertia come, you know, everything goes forward, and then you snap back up. And then the world is just a jumble, because you don't bounce uniformly. You're just kind of tossed around like a rag doll until you settle, and then you're swinging. And at that point, the adrenaline kicks in, and it was just a great ride. You know, I just loved it.
Yeah, I think I don't know if it was with you I had this conversation or not, but so I've never done it because my concern is I really don't like having my head upside down and I talk. If you listen to the podcast, if you listen to me at all, you know I get motion sickness like this. So the thought of being upside down and bouncing and like you said, being thrown around like a rag dog makes me think like, oh my God, this is gonna make me sick.
So that was something when I did it. The harness, I was connected on my back. You could do it from your feet upside down, but you could also do it with your back. And I did it with from my back for the same reason, because I just had this thought of everything in my stomach coming out when, the bungee cord caught me. And I think most people, now that in retrospect, I think most people did it that way. Very few
Huh.
people do it from their feet.
Well, that's crazy. I didn't even know you could do it from your back. I think I've only ever seen it from people's feet.
Yeah.
So that way, yeah. So then
You just like
wait,
Superman.
you're
Yeah.
Superman. Oh, well, that would be. How did I not know you could do this from your back? See, you learn something every day through other people's stories. There you go. So, how long did it take? And then did they drop you to the ground or back up and then you
Yeah.
went back down?
So the whole experience from the time I left the ground to the time they lowered, because once they let you swing, once your swing kind of settles a little bit, then they lower you down. Because you're attached to the basket, and then they just lower the basket. Was less than 5 minutes probably. Um, you know, uh, and after myself and I think one other guy that I worked with, after we did it, there was a line there for 3 days, and while they were there, everybody was on board.
So, it got very popular. So, were a lot of people watching you? Like, did you feel the pressure
Oh
of the
yeah,
crowd?
that was the funny part, was there were a lot of people that would stand around and look, but nobody was doing it. And then, my coworker and I walked up, and we started getting hooked up, and then it was like people were calling other people, going, "Hey, you need to come over there. This guy's about to go off the crane. You got to come over and watch. Let's see if this guy splats." Same reason people watch NASCAR, right?
Yeah. Did they cheer? Like, did you feel like a
Oh
hero? Like, were you like, I'm the man?
yeah. There was a big
Wow.
response from the crowd, so it was a good time.
That's awesome. Yeah, no wonder it's such a clear memory, even though it's, what you say, 20 plus years ago. Yeah, and I mean that is brave because now clearly people have done it. Safety measures are all in place, but you were definitely taking a risk. And I like how you pointed it out too. I mean, the same thing with the majority of thrill type first times or activities, they don't last very long. I mean, the fear leading up to it probably lasts a lot longer in the
Oh
build
yeah.
up than the actual like doing it. And that's I'm sure you experience with other thrill type activities. It's like when the adrenaline kicks in, the fear is completely gone and you're in a completely different space and you feel that thrill. And that's the addiction of that thrill seekers seek and look for.
Yeah,
Uh,
fear of the unknown is far worse than the reality of a lot
of,
of what we do. So
yeah, of actually doing it. So, well, that is a great story. Anything else you remember from it, or that kind of did? How did that like shape you? Like, what was your takeaway from it afterwards?
um, kind of a funny part of it that I remember was I had uh, I had just turned 18, but I was still living at home prior to going to the Marine Corps, going off to boot camp. So, and like I said, I paid a little bit extra money to get a videotape, the VHS videotape made, right?
Yeah. VHS.
um, um, and so when I finished work, I ran home and I ran into the house and I'm like, "Hey mom, look what I did today." And my mom watched the video and lost her mind. She's like, "What were you thinking? That was the dumbest thing ever." I'm like, "What? It was fun. It was safe. I'm alive." And she's like, "No, that was stupid. They could have killed you." I'm like, "No, it was fine." So yeah, that was the other thing that I remember my mom being so mad at me that I did it. But I mean, as far as how it shaped me, that was definitely, like I said, one of the first times I experienced like the fear of the unknown and anticipation of something that in my head was going to be far different than the reality. And so there was a lot of things in my Marine Corps career that came later, that I tried to fill in the gaps of, what I didn't know and what I thought was going to be really bad with the reality of the situation, either through people that have experienced it before me, or otherwise, trying to get information about what the reality of the situation was.
Oh,
And
wow. Yeah. What an awesome takeaway to have at such a young age, to then base your future fears off of, and understanding like, hey, I need the information. I need to educate myself. It might not be as bad as I think. And also understanding like, hey, I don't want to do this. I couldn't turn back. And it turned out to be an awesome experience.
right, yeah, because there was plenty of people that got up there in the basket and never came off of it. They just
Backed out.
back down. You know, and I didn't want to be that person. For me anyway, that was a once in a lifetime opportunity, and that's probably, in retrospect, that's the reality of it. That I've been all over the place since then, and I don't think I've ever come across somewhere where I could go bungee jumping without going way out of my way to do it. It's just not something that you find a lot. For as much of a I don't even know what you would call pop culture reference that it is, you just don't see it very much. So I'm not going to waste that opportunity by going up there and then coming back down the same way I went up.
Yeah. I just have to, learning and have the mindset of going for it,
Yeah.
pushing past that fear. And oh, well, that's awesome. That's a excellent first time story that outlines just how much first times in your experience, have the ability to shape us, to impact us. And like you said, you never did it again. And that's not what it was about. It was more about the lessons learned from it, and um, you know, the courage and, mindset that it provided you with. I mean, that's very powerful. Did you tell when you were in boot camp, did you tell the story to others? Like, was that not that we have a whole lot of time to talk to other recruits, but like, how is like sharing that story with other people?
Well, yeah, when I went to boot camp, I told some people, and it was new enough then. It was new enough for years after that telling that story, people were like, "Oh wow, what was it like? And would you do it again?" And that you're not right or whatever, you're crazy. So yeah, that, I mean, especially in boot camp, it kind of gave me that perspective, the same perspective of because we all had our preconceived concept of what boot camps was going to really be like. And I applied that same mindset to boot camp, and I kind of tried to apply it and try to share that philosophy with, my fellow recruits, and kind of the same thing. And they're like, because you could hear, even you remember how it was, the other recruits are going to tell, telling horror stories about what, they think the drill instructors are going to do to you. And okay, well, some of them got pretty far fetched. So let's kind of ground this in reality, and what do we expect to happen, and what do the drill instructors expect to happen, and let's meet somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. So, and this is also very relevant to what's happening today, and not over psyching yourself out.
Yeah.
Like, there's, get the facts, stay
Yeah.
rooted in the facts and that understanding, and, plan and behave and think accordingly versus letting your imagination run wild and, listen to what everybody else, worst case scenario that they're imagining, and then making things so much worse for yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Oh, I love it. All right. So let's play the first time lightning round. Let's find out a
Okay.
little bit more about you. So the way it works, I will throw something out there. If you have done it before, you say up. So you would swipe up on the app because you've already done it. If you've never done it, not interested in doing it, you would swipe left. And then if you've never done it but would like to do it, you would swipe right. So first one.
Wow, that's a lot of things to remember.
You got this. All right. Play rugby.
Up.
When's the first time you played rugby?
First time I played rugby was 95, I think 96. I was at 8th Com Battalion in North Carolina, and my battalion commander, we had an exercise that we were doing with the Brits. And
That will do it.
yeah, my battalion commander was a huge rugby fan, and in his infinite wisdom, challenged the British Royal Marines to a game of rugby. Yeah,
How did that turn out?
painfully. Those are some big lads, let me tell you.
And they know the game.
And they know how to play the game far better than I do.
Oh man. Oh, well, that I would like to go back in time and watch that game go down. Sometimes Marines really do get
You
their
don't make it all the way through. It was a lot of fun.
no.
Don't get me wrong, it was a great time, but yeah.
All right. Drive a go-kart.
Up.
Yeah, figured you'd definitely done that before. Go bobsledding.
Right.
Yeah, definitely like to do that myself. Okay, eat snails.
Up.
When was the first time you had snails?
That was in Virginia when I was there in 2012 or something. I went to a restaurant, a very good restaurant that was also doing a wine tasting, kind of wine pairing thing, and they had escargot, and it didn't cost me anything extra for it was part. I had the choice of that or something else as an appetizer, so I got that. And since then, I've had them. I've had it several times. I actually really like escargot. It's quite good.
All right, awesome. Okay, donate money to a political campaign.
Left.
Left. Play the piano.
I've actually never played the piano. Right. But I'm
Right.
going to take lessons coming up shortly.
Yeah. So before we started broadcasting, Patricia was mentioning that they just got a piano. So both her and Don will be having the first time of playing the piano. So I need to catch up and set my room up so I can take my lessons and do that too. We can exchange what songs we've learned. So what's that?
Dueling pianos.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like in those you ever been to was in those piano bars where they have the two pianos and they what was that? What was that cartoon that they have? It was like Daffy Duck and I forget. Oh, anyways. Okay. So have you ever broken a bone?
No, left.
Left. Gone on a picnic.
Up.
Oh. Sheared a sheep.
Left.
Left. Don't want to give it a go, huh?
No.
Okay. Take a sculpting class.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I think that would be a lot of fun. All right, so that is it for the first time lightning round. So today's first time story prompt is first attention.
First attention.
Detention, first
Yes,
school detention. Have you ever been in detention and
I have.
do you remember your first one and what was it for?
First one. I think as far as I can remember, I only went once. I was walking behind my chorus teacher, and there was a puddle on the ground, and I had meant to just kind of flick water at her, And what I ended up doing was flicking water all the way up her back.
Oh, Don.
She didn't take it very well.
Oh, well, you kind of did deserve detention for that one. How old were you?
Oh, I was 16.
Oh.
Actually, you know what? Actually, I take that back because that wasn't my first time. Because it was the chorus teacher that gave me detention the first time. Before that, we filled her car with packing peanuts as a practical joke, and then she gave us detention. There was like 5 of us that got it.
Okay, why did she go after your quite why was she the target?
Well, it was one of those practical. A friend of ours was graduating, and he was also in the course, and so it was like, okay, so what do you want to do for your senior year practical joke? He's like, well, I got like, I don't know how he got them or why he got them. He had like 10 trash bags full of packing peanuts. So let's go fill Mrs. Lester's car with packing peanuts. Okay, let's do it.
So did you guys fess up? Like, how did she find out it was you guys? Did you guys fess up
Well, it
and get?
wasn't a difficult process. There were 6 guys in chorus, and all 6 of us were involved. So none of the girls would have done it. They weren't that mischievous or reckless. So yeah.
I still feel like, why not the math teacher or the English teacher or the principal? Like, what was up with the course teacher?
Celeste was a really cool person. She just had a very good sense of justice. So
it was out of respect that she was the target.
oh yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay, so final question. What new or how have things changed for you now that we are in this new environment with the coronavirus?
Well, it's Germany is a very social country, in that you basically walk everywhere. We live in a pretty small in a village, and there's a little town square where there's a pizza place, and the apothecary is there, and you always, like, if the weather is nice, and we had a couple of days where the weather was, the temperature got up into the 60s, and this time of year, all of the Germans would just crowd to that square and have pizza and whatever, and ice cream and whatnot. And now all of that is gone. It really makes our town kind of feel deserted, and really brings a stark reality to how serious it is. Like, they don't want people, groups with more than 2 people, except for families, collecting together. So that basically eliminates all social functions here in Germany. And we just recently, I think last week was supposed to be the beginning of Volksfest, which is the German spring festival. Literally hundreds of thousands of people come to this, and they canceled it. So there should have been, the population of Stuttgart almost doubled.
Yeah, and that's why everybody donned their drindles and their
heroes and drank gallons of beer and consumed nearly lethal amounts of food, and just all of that had to be postponed and canceled. And you can't. There's a lot of other festivity, from about Volksfest on until Oktoberfest. There's something going on almost every weekend. There's some kind of festival or some kind of something going on somewhere, and it's just utterly quiet. All of that has ended, so you have to. You become very nuclear. Kind of isolate yourself. What can you do in your house, and what can you do in your yard? And but I also think that the initial shock of that is kind of wearing off. I think people initially, when the German government put those restrictions in place, people were so surprised by it that they did kind of lock down and just turtle up inside of their homes. But I think people are kind of understanding that it's not quite as severe as maybe they made it out. You can go exercise, you can go for walks, you can go for bike rides, you can do all that kind of stuff. You just can't, go ask.
Congregate, yeah. So you can go on that bike ride. You can't go to the beer garden
Right,
after the
exactly.
bike ride and have the beer, which is a big
So
thing that they do in Europe and in Germany.
yeah,
On the path for people who don't know. So on the bike path and the walking path, you have different beer gardens where people stop and have a beer and then get back on their bikes or walking. So yeah, it's a very outdoor uh, oriented society. They love to be, yeah, outside and interacting and doing things, and like I said, going out to the squares and meeting up. And so while most people don't realize that Germans are social individuals, they sure are. Yeah. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for joining me and doing this with me. It was really great to see you and to hear all of these stories. Uh, really like that.
so thanks for having me. And hey, hey out there to all the people in Facebook land. So.
All right. We're